All right, Hangouts Live. Here we go. And welcome back to another episode of This Week in Photo. I am your host, Frederick Van Johnson. Today, very interesting show. Lots of cool topics that I'm interested in, as if I'm not interested in every topic we talk about on every every episode of TWiP. But on this show, there are things that I'm really interested in. But joining me to talk about these topics are Mr. Martin Bailey and Don Komarechka. Hey, guys, how are you doing?
Very good, Frederick. How about yourself?
I'm doing good, man. Like we were talking about in the green room before I started rolling here. I'm in the pre international travel neurosis period where I'm packing and unpacking, and I'm trying to make the perfect camera bag. I don't want to get to Vietnam and like figure out that I forgot some crucial piece of gear that I wish I could, I wish I brought, and then I don't want to bring the whole gear locker with me as well. So I'm in that mode right now. It's crazy, but good to have you guys on. Martin, I know you're running around the world all the time, and as we said in the green room, you take 3 lenses with you. That's it when you go.
Yeah.
But,
now I mean, that's my downsizing. I've managed to get my kit down to an 11 to 24, 24 to 70, and 100 to 400 for most of the time.
Yeah.
So it's good. It's been liberating, even without going to mirrorless.
Yeah, but see, that's the part of me. Part of me is just like, do I want to be liberated or do I want to have options?
That for me is still giving me options. I go from 11 to 400 millimeters now with 3 lenses.
You're covered.
So it's great. It's all good. We live in a wonderful age.
Yeah, the age of choice. But that's that whole. Sometimes choice isn't awesome, and no, I'm not a communist. But sometimes having choice is paralyzing, which is where I am right now. Don, what about you, man? When you're running around taking pictures around the world, what do you have in your bag?
Well, I love the setup that Martin has, and I wish I could stick to it. But I always end up spilling over, and I'll bring my macro lens with me. I will bring my fisheye lens with me. I will bring a separate body that I use for infrared photography. And then by the time I add in all sorts of other little bits and pieces, I got the kitchen sink in my bag anyhow. So
You're
the
like
whole
Charlie Brown. You're like Charlie Brown going camping. That's too much, man. Come on. Oh. Yeah.
But I try to slim it down as much as I can to fit it into a messenger bag that kind of fits by my side. It's a nice little leather bag that's not a camera bag, that I've put in some inserts to divide up the gear properly, so that it's I do a lot of traveling in Eastern Europe, and I'm a little bit cautious about where I'm flashing my camera gear around, and so I fit as much of it as I possibly can inside that bag. It's bulging like it looks like we're traveling, and I've got a bag full of dirty clothes because we're backpacking across Europe, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so people are none the wiser until I pull out the expensive gear. But I wish I could narrow it down farther.
Yeah, I'm excited because I'm I'm heading out on this trip with that everyday messenger camera bag that that Kickstarter that Peak Design and Trey Ratcliffe did. So that's my bag. And then a couple weeks ago, I pulled the trigger and bought the new Panasonic Lumix GX8, which is one of their flagship Micro Four Thirds cameras. So been shooting with it over the last couple of weeks to get used to it, but I'm ready to rock. I'm ready to go take some pictures. All right, guys, enough about me. Let's dive into the show. Story number 1 is about Model Mayhem. So if you shoot models or you are a model, you probably know about Model Mayhem. They're a service. They're kind of like the Facebook for models and photographers and makeup artists, where you can go and say, hey, I need a model on this day. You can put out a casting call. People respond to you. You pick one. And so the story should go, the model shows up and you do the job. But as Model Mayhem, and everyone else that has used the service knows, sometimes it doesn't always go that way. 9 times, I don't know if it's 9 times out of 10, but a lot of the time the model doesn't show up and you end up trying to scramble to figure out how to complete the job. And other folks say, well, you get what you pay for. You should have gone to an agency to get a proper model, So there's those kinds of things. So what Model Mayhem is doing is they've introduced something called verified credits. And essentially what it is a system to give what they're saying, and I'm reading from the show notes here, to give more credence to the claims of the users on the site. It allows users to rate each other as if they've worked together. They can sing the praises from previous people that gave them credits or previous credits, and the credits must be verified and accepted by the other party. You'll be able to view how many times users have worked together, when the collaboration took place, what their experience have been to a certain extent, and it will allow them to obviously strengthen their professional network. By the way, this story comes to us from our friends over at SLR Lounge, but this is interesting, and I've tried to use Model Mayhem several times, and it's been about kind of like a 50-50 hit or miss, maybe 75-25, with 75 being miss in terms of, you know, it's almost like dating. I don't know. But Don, have you used Model Mayhem at all, and are you familiar with the service?
I'm familiar with the service. I've never used it. I don't photograph models in my professional work. But the interesting thing about this is I think that it's something that is sorely needed because, for one, I mean, you've got photographers who could be just about anybody, and they're asking for these models to come for a shoot, maybe a makeup artist as well, and you might be weary about the person who you're about to engage in, you know, what should be upright professional activities, but who knows how often that happens, or maybe somebody just flakes out. Right? So maybe they just don't show up when you've booked a specific shoot, and you know, maybe your client is depending on that. Maybe you book the model and then the makeup artist doesn't show up, or you know, what kind of a scenario like that. So I think it's good that you're able to verify now. Although, you know, I was reading into it, and I think that it's all sort of positive spin only, which I think could be a detriment. I don't think that you're allowed to leave any negative comments whatsoever. So you have to just let the silence speak for the negativity and let the positivity kind of ramp up and add the credibility in that way.
I know. I have one word for Model Mayhem: escrow. If they institute a process by which if a model, you know, accepts a job and they have an account on the system, they have to deposit a certain amount of money into a quote escrow account along with the photographer. If the job is completed, you get your money back along with the fee. If you flake, your money's gone. At least someone gets some money out of it. That's the issue. Martin, have you? I know they don't. I don't think they have Model Mayhem over in Tokyo, but you've seen the service, right?
And I think they do. I looked at it years ago when I was almost trying to set up a model job where I was going to go and do something. Mm-hmm. They have it here, I'm pretty sure, or something similar. I remember looking, but. Yeah, I mean, for me, most of my models are like snow monkeys and red crown cranes and sea eagles and things.
Yeah.
So
you know, they very rarely flake. I know.
Yeah, I get what's there, but yeah. I agree with I agree with Don. I think that there's a certain amount of weariness from both parties. I mean, if I was a good-looking young model, I wouldn't want to be just
Who
going
says
off.
You aren't, Martin?
I wouldn't want to be just going off and hooking up with some photographer that I've got no idea, you know, whether he's the real deal or not either. Yeah. So yeah. I think that, you know, it works both ways. If you're a photographer, no one's got time to waste sitting around waiting for someone that doesn't turn up. And if you're a model, you don't necessarily want to be going and hooking up with anyone that you don't really know what their motives are.
Yeah.
So it's good to get that from both sides. It's a good thing all around.
But that what you highlighted there, Martin, is an inherent issue with that particular industry. You know, the wannabes and the hopefuls that are trying to get their modeling career started, and what they call on Model Mayhem the GWCs, a guy with camera that wants to take pictures of half naked or naked women. You know, and he's like, oh, hey, Model Mayhem, a treasure trove. I can just say I'm a photographer and get them to show up at XYZ location and take pictures, even if I don't have a memory card in the camera. It's all good, right? So, yeah. But there's always going to be that. I mean, it's the seedy underbelly of this business, right? There's always going to be that sliver of the photographer populations that's going to do that, and there's always going to be the sliver of the population of the model side that is going to flake, right? And like you said, the other piece of it, the other dimension of the triangle is when, you know, these are young girls that are, you know, they could be taken advantage of in many different horrible ways, and they're putting themselves in harm's way by going to a strange location with a strange guy that they just read about on a site they just signed up for. So, you know, I think there should be some more kind of safeguards in there. I don't know what they are. I mean, the escrow thing is an idea, but I don't know. It seems like there should be something else in there to keep these people safe.
Yeah. You look at like what say feedback on any website. It's hard to control exactly what kind of feedback is given and how people game that system as well, right? Like if you look at eBay, if you see somebody that has a lot of positive reviews, well, maybe they're reviews and feedback from like 2-cent items that were never actually shipped to anybody, but it gives them a very high rating, so that when you go and you buy a $1,000 item, it looks like they're a reputable business person, but then you never get that item.
That's a good idea, Don. Thank you.
Okay, but you see in Model Mayhem, something like that could also happen, but there wouldn't necessarily be a financial gain for the photographer. It would be for whatever perverse purposes they might have, and so the anonymity would disappear in that scenario. And I don't think that it would be gamed in the same way. I think that it's one level of security that has been sorely needed for both Model Mayhem and any other service like it, I should say. But I still think more should be done too.
Yeah, it's like whenever you try to merge the digital world with the physical world, stuff's gonna happen. And then you sprinkle in the fact that these are pretty women with high aspirations and photographers who also have high aspirations, but a tiny contingent of them are nefarious. It's scary. I don't know, Martin. I always like to put you on the seat and make you play armchair quarterback. If you were like running this company, Model Mayhem, and your constituency was saying, hey, there's these segments of our population that are doing the wrong thing, but by and large, what we're doing is a positive thing. What would you do? Like, how would you help to circumvent the situation?
I don't know. I mean, I think what they've done is a major step forward. Maybe that, I don't know, might have a sleaze bag rating or something. It's the
gumminess. What would that icon look like?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Well, but see, that's dangerous too, because if you've got 1,000 great reviews for a restaurant and then you have one negative review that says, I saw a cockroach in the corner, nobody cares about those 1,000 positive reviews. They only read the one negative one. So even if the negative review is unsubstantiated in any way, and it's just somebody that has a vendetta against somebody, then that will carry far more weight than it should, and often you can't do anything about it, right?
Yeah. Or if you have a photographer that has a giant following of models already, and he says, hey, girls, go rate me on Model Mayhem because they have this verified credits thing, and he gets an exorbitantly high rating because of that. Martin, I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
No, well, I mean, there's that. I think even with the reviews, there's the you were saying that they all seem to be positive reviews, but I'm sure if you're writing one of these reviews, you can put negative comments in there as well, and any interaction is totally subjective, and so the photographer could be a perfectly straight up, nice guy, but he maybe looks at the model a little bit different, a little bit differently to how she would have expected, and all of a sudden he's a sleazebag, and he didn't mean to be, and so there's ways for this to become a little bit sort of a negative feature as well, but I think in general it'll work well, and the sleazebag thing is really just that's more a joke than anything. But I can't think of anything more than what they're currently trying to implement.
Well, I would think a lot of the onus goes to the photographer and the model to protect themselves as well. So if you're a model, don't do stupid stuff, right? Don't show up in a strange neighborhood alone with your bikini, go into a strange dude's house that claims you're a photographer that you never met before. That's just Darwin at work right there, right? So don't do that. Bring someone with you or don't go. That's it. And then on the photographer side, you're opening yourself up for all kinds of liability if this model is nefarious and she wants to screw you and say that you did something that you didn't do and it's your word against hers. Guess whose career is going to be ruined? It's going to be yours. So have someone there, a makeup artist, a friend, an assistant, or someone in the room. It should never just be you and a model shooting.
Well, and that would be a wonderful disclaimer to have in front of every single interaction that gets put forward, because a lot of these models are very naive, right? There might be a certain level of innocence, especially if it's their very first time doing something like this. And you're right, Frederick, that they should know better. But what if they don't know better? What if they haven't been told better? There's always sort of the lesson learned the hard way, and I'd rather that never happen. So, Darwin at work to some degree, but I think that it's more while it is the responsibility of the people involved to stay safe, the steward of that responsibility to make sure all the variables are known should also be Model Mayhem.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. But yeah, and again, I mean, like you said, a lot of it falls on the model and the photographer because, like, using the Darwin example, the gazelle that's being eaten by the lion, the last words are, "No one told me I should stay with the pack." It's like, you can't. Yeah. It's not going to help you when you're being eaten already. So you gotta. It's scary. It's a scary business. But just common sense. Protect yourself, both on the photographer and the model side. Yeah. Makeup artists, yeah, you guys are probably okay, but photographers and models, make sure at least hire a makeup artist to be there just to protect everybody.
Well, all right, guys. That's one thing that I was going to say. I actually, when I was considering going, using a model for something a while back, a mental note that I'd made to myself was that I was going to be sure that I made a note that when I approached the model, that my assistant would be with me, parenthesis wife, so that they know that it's not just going to be a guy who could be a sleazebag. I was going to say who's a sleazebag. I hope I'm not. So just having that additional bit of reassurance is probably a good thing for people using that kind of service to do as well.
Yeah, but the world is strange. It could be like, oh, this guy and his wife. I'll turn to that kind of stuff. Models bring someone with you. That's it. Just bring someone with you, and photographers have someone with you, like a wife or a makeup artist or someone, and then it's all good. Scary stuff, but good stuff. I applaud Model Mayhem for moving in this verified credits direction. I think it makes a lot of sense, and hopefully it's going to help turn their image around, because I've heard whenever in the industry you mention Model Mayhem, people roll their eyes lately, because it's the flake factor. It's, it kind of says, oh, you can afford to go to an agency and you're an amateur or something because you're using Model Mayhem. And I don't think that's the case at all. There's lots of amazingly talented and high caliber models on Model Mayhem, as well as professional photographers that are really, really good on there. But the stigma that's overlaying them is kind of like a translucent film that needs to be removed. So, all right, guys, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Eyefi jumping into the world of photo sharing with its acquisition of Jeremy Cowart's OKDOTHIS. And FYI, you're going to hear right now the fact that Eyefi is a sponsor of This Week in Photo. All right, guys, we're back. Eyefi has acquired OKDOTHIS, and they're moving into the world of social media and photo sharing apps. So let me read this little blurb from their press from Petapixel. Actually, this story comes to us. They said, today the company Eyefi jumped into the world of mobile apps by announcing that it has acquired OKDOTHIS, the photography inspiration app and community that was created in 2012 by photographer Jeremy Cowart, who's also a friend of TWiP, by the way, and the Nashville-based app startup Alumpa. Eyefi says the acquisition will allow it to begin engaging directly with photographers to inspire creativity and the exchange of ideas. So, OKDOTHIS and Eyefi. First of all, I want to get you guys your opinions on both of these companies. Martin, you go first. Have you used either of these services, the Eyefi, which was the Wi-Fi card, and now they're expanding into the cloud and apps, or OKDOTHIS, this photo sharing app?
No.
No, period. On to the next. Okay, and why not? So what's your perception of Eyefi as a company? So they've been around for a long time doing those cards. What's your perception of them right now?
I like what they're doing. I think that they're doing a lot for the industry in general. I think it's Eyefi that puts together those 100 photographers of the year or of the decade, things like that. I like their contributions to the photography industry. I definitely had, since the release of the first Eyefi card, I've had their products on my radar. But for me, because I often shoot in relatively remote places, it's never really meant much sense for me to try and get things up into the cloud quickly. It's always been there. It's an option. I think that they've got good products, and obviously their success proves that. But it's just never quite been something that I've wanted to jump in.
It doesn't fit your workflow. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. It's interesting, and from my perspective, and of course, like I said, there our latest or one of our newest sponsors to This Week in Photo. So thank you, Eyefi, supporting us and helping get the word out. But they're and I told those guys when I was having early conversations with them, my perception of Eyefi was they were a solution that was awesome back when we needed that solution, and then we got cameras that had Wi-Fi capabilities in them and made it kind of no longer necessary to have the Wi-Fi on the card. And then now, however, they schooled me and they said, well, now they're moving into the cloud and they're doing all the social stuff with OKDOTHIS, and they're kind of reinventing the direction of the company. So it's really interesting to see where they've come, but I think they've not done a great job of communicating that path from we were here, and we solved this problem, and now we're here. That what happened in between is kind of cloudy. Don Komarechka, what about you? Have you ever used this service?
Yeah, well, I experimented with Eyefi early on. I was working at a camera store many years ago, and the first Eyefi cards had kind of come into the store, and we were playing with them, and it was a really cool idea, well before Wi-Fi had ever been dreamt of to be put into a camera. Yeah. And so they were pioneers in that respect. And to say that they're buying an app that kind of goes in a completely different direction from where they started is both good and bad, in my opinion. I mean, I know that they need to reinvent themselves, and they're trying to stay relevant. And as Martin said, that they've made some great contributions to the photographic community, and I think that will continue in this particular direction. An app like OKDOTHIS, I mean, if they can wrap that into their technology somehow, then they have the ability to say, take a picture right away, or heck, maybe within a specific minute of a day, maybe they'll have a particular contest where that happens, and then immediately then, with people using an Eyefi card, then they have the ability to have that uploaded, and it's automatically all up there within 5 minutes afterwards, and then that's a fun kind of competition to have, right? So yeah. I can see there's tons of really cool ideas for them to start to develop this forward. But like Martin, I have not found a way to wrap this into my own photographic workflow. Right. Part of that is because my cameras use compact flash cards, and while I think they have a compact flash adapter, I'm sure that there would be a performance hit, and their capacity of their cards are less than I usually use. As I was on last time, I think I mentioned that I use like 128 and 256 gig memory cards and all that.
Yes, you did. Yeah, did you mention you had a 1 terabyte card or something?
No, but I said that if there was a 512 gig card, I would be the first in line to buy it. Wow. And so Eyefi doesn't hit exactly the market that I am, but I am far, far from the average photographer in that in that situation. If you were a street photographer and you wanted to, like, even if you're in like a conflict zone, or you're photographing around protests or riots or something, and if you could have a copy of your images automatically leave the camera memory card, so that if somebody then confiscates your memory card, then it's like, okay, yeah, you know what, they're gone.
Yeah, totally.
To yourself as they're already in the cloud, Yeah. And so there's tons of valid use cases in all sorts of things, and I think that they're still relevant, but I think this purchase does them well to help reinvent their own. I think
you hit it. Both of you guys hit it right on the head. And what I was thinking was there's a marketing issue there, right? So there's when I go to a site, I want to know what problem does this solve for me? Like, how can I use this right now amongst the storm of other people vying for my images for free, and Google and Apple and Flickr and 500 pics and all this stuff? You have an offering here. What can it do for me that's different than what these guys can do? And they have some things that are different than what everyone else can do, but they've done a poor job of communicating that. I think largely because they've been pivoting. I think they've been in a constant pivot away from this hardware card-based thing into what they're kind of trying to morph into now. So that's interesting that they do this. And Jeremy, when Jeremy launched this, I think I interviewed him. We'll link to that interview that I did with Jeremy back when he launched it. I think I talked to him before, like a couple of weeks or a week before he launched OKDOTHIS, and you'll hear what that app is about and what his vision was for that app, and it is pretty cool. Like you said, Don, it solves the issue of, okay, I like to shoot with this cool camera that I bought. What should I shoot? It solves that and then gives you feedback on it. So
you know what? If you tell somebody, oh, go take a picture that's creative, well, you're going to come back with the most boring, non-creative garbage. But if you tell somebody to go out and take a picture of, you know, tea splashing out of a teacup. Well, how many people are going to find a very creative approach to that within lighting and the subject matter and maybe a model and all these different things all relating to that one particular subject because you planted a seed. And you gave them limitations for which creativity is born from. And I think OKDoThis does a great job at filling that role very, very well. You have to be a self-starter to get something out of an app like that, though. I mean, it's not like you're being forced to do it. You have to want to. You have to want that creative juice to start flowing. But then once you do that, then you've got an outlet to say, okay, well, you know, I've got the match here. Where's my fuel for this particular fire?
Yeah, yeah. And you can see what other people have done too. So you say, you know what, like one of these examples that Petapixel put in their article is examples of do's include defy gravity, right? So there are many different interpretations of defying gravity. You come up with your interpretation of defying gravity, which may be you jumping in the air and snapping a picture or something, but then you go and look and see what thousands of other people's interpretation of that phrase was, and it kind of, you know, like, oh, I never thought about that. That's kind of cool. You know, I'll try that next time. And it inspires you for the next do that pops up.
You know, I think that we all, as we shoot, we build up a mental database of possibilities that seed our creativity. And having that, even if you don't have the time even to go and shoot every day, just looking at things like that plants those little ideas, and we draw from them. Whenever we compose an image, whenever we try to figure out what the best or the optimal shutter speed is, or what the shutter speed does to the subject. It all helps us gives us little. Like I always think of it like a filing cabinet. You know, you've got a landscape one, you've got a model one, you've got a macro one, and in there is all of these different ideas, and you draw from them pretty quickly. But the more you shoot, the better you get at doing that. And it's like the you know, a few years ago, the big thing was to do these 365 projects, where you do I never did one because I honestly don't think that I have the time and probably not even the commitment to do it every day. But I think that they help people, because having a camera in your hand, making at least a handful of photos every day, increases your ability to use that machine. You know, if I'm doing something where I don't have a camera in my hand for a few weeks, even though I make my living from photography and photography-related activities, if I don't pick my camera up for a few weeks, it feels a little bit rusty when I pick it up. It comes back like instantly. But I think that when you have some sort of a motivation to pick up your camera and make at least 1 or 2 photos every day, it keeps the sort of, you know, the muscle memory and the mental act of actually changing your settings, and that it really helps you to do that. So, and that's where apps like OKDoThis come in, because, you know, like Don said, you don't always have an idea of what you want to shoot each day. It's not necessarily the result that's important. It's the act of making the photograph that's important.
Yeah. You look at Instagram and their, you know, meteoric popularity. And I look at an app like this versus like Instagram versus OKDoThis, and I think, okay, how can OKDoThis compete against the likes of an Instagram? And I don't think that's the proper question to be asking. Instagram is Instagram. You know, people are going to use it, and they're going to share pictures of their food, their cat, their feet, portraits, good shots, bad shots, whatever are going on Instagram. OKDoThis, I think of as if you're like focusing a beam down a little bit, and you're saying, okay, now I have something to go do. I'm going to go literally go do it. So yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. You know, I like to see. I'm interested to see what's next for these guys and where they're going to go in terms of the integration with Eyefi and the Eyefi cloud that they have going on. When I head over to Vietnam, I'm gonna use this service. I'm gonna put it to its test. So I'm gonna use it. OKDoThis. I might, you know, I don't know if anyone can do any do's that I post from Vietnam, you know, but I'm definitely going to use the Eyefi cloud to post images. So, and basically, you know, maybe I'll use both of them. So if you're on OKDoThis, my username is just my name's Frederick Van on there. So follow me on OKDoThis to see what I do there. And then I'm going to post on This Week in Photo a link to a gallery, because with Eyefi you can create a gallery, and and basically I can just keep updating that gallery throughout my trip. So as I shoot photos and have a nice photo that I feel like I'm okay with sharing, I'll put it in that gallery and people can see what I'm doing over in Vietnam. So
Well, and so that brings up an interesting point that kind of piggybacks on what Martin said as well, where I haven't done a 365 project either, though I do my snowflake project every winter, which just about kills me every year, because it's important to make that commitment to yourself, to say, okay, well, I'm going to do something every day, I'm going to stay active, and I'm going to stay engaged within my photography. The problem with a 365 project and that kind of incentive is that you almost have an obligation to share those images with the world as proof that you took them, regardless of if they're good or not.
yeah.
So, if you have a lack of inspiration for a week and you're putting up, pictures of whatever you're finding at your desk at, 11:50 at night because you never had time to take a picture, you're not doing anybody any service. You're just taking that picture out of a sense of obligation to have one to complete the project. And, that's been the biggest downfall of that particular type of scenario. But if you are looking for a creative option from OKDOTHIS, you're not obligated to do it every day. If you have a day where you're just too busy, you don't take 5 minutes that you don't have to take a picture that you don't want to take.
Right.
And so long as you keep checking back and keeping yourself engaged in it, I think it's worthwhile.
Yeah, you're not obligated to do the do. I like that. I had to get that in there. All right, guys, we're going to take another quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about DJI, the drone folks, and Hasselblad teaming up to form a strategic partnership. All right, guys, we're back. DJI and Hasselblad are cozying up together. So here's the blurb I'm going to read to you. Medium format and aerial camera maker Hasselblad has sold a minority stake to the Chinese drone giant SZ DJI Technology Company Limited in what the two companies describe as a corporate partnership. The exact stake has not been revealed, but both sides are keen to point out that there will be no merging of the businesses, and from an external viewpoint, nothing will change. This is interesting. So what does it mean? So you're merging, got a minority stake, so that just means you have, does that mean Hasselblad has given up a little bit of influence to DJI now? What does that mean? Martin, I read this a couple of times. In fact, the paragraph is much longer than this, and this comes to us from DP Review. It's much longer than this, but I'm still trying to understand what the nuance of this is. Normally you can see, like with the OKDOTHIS and Eyefi, it's like, okay, they needed that social and the app piece to add to their business. Here, I'm trying to figure out, what does this mean for DJI? What do you think?
I was very much the same. I read through it a couple of times, and I was trying to think, okay, so what's the benefit here? I think what it is it's DJI are probably, they've got a lot of battles to fight at the moment. Drones are being, not everyone, but people love drones. I'd love an Inspire. They're really cool. You go off and you can shoot some really cool stuff. But there's, on the other side, you've got your governments around the world trying to close them down. Trying to stop people from flying drones here, there, and pretty much everywhere. And so I think that if this company can all of a sudden say we're partnered with Hasselblad, a company that has been making cameras for as long as cameras have been around almost, it gives them a big chunk of street cred that they can probably use in their favor. I don't know if that's the reason for this. We could be thinking of actually including some kind of Hasselblad lenses or some sort of technology in the drones. That wouldn't surprise me either. And I'm sure that having probably with a big enough chunk to get someone on the board will help them to get those sort of things done. But at the end of the day, I keep coming back to the street cred factor. I think that they're trying to get validation as a serious company, a photographic hardware company, and if that's the case, and if they had the money to go and buy a chunk of Hasselblad, then all power to them.
Maybe that was it. Maybe it's because buying a chunk of Hasselblad was relatively inexpensive because they're not a gigantic company. But if it was the street cred piece or tangent that they were taking, I would have, I think like buying a stake or taking a stake in Sony or Fuji or Panasonic or someone like that or Nikon or even Canon, one of those guys, and I didn't mean to say even Canon, but Nikon or Canon. I'm going to get hate mail for that. The Nikon or Canon, one of the more mainstream players. But I'm thinking, like, why Hasselblad? Like, I don't even know it. I mean, I know one person that shoots Hasselblad right now. So, I don't know.
Maybe that's it, though. Maybe it's, Hasselblad. I don't know how much Hasselblad is worth, but maybe it was what you touched on there, Frederick, that Hasselblad is relatively small compared to some companies like the big names that you mentioned there. Mm-hmm. So maybe it was just easier to buy a controlling percentage of their stock that it was possible. And if it is for street cred, then it's probably going to be a lot easier for them to buy enough of Hasselblad compared to buying enough of Canon or Nikon or Sony. So maybe it is just all about the numbers.
Yeah, it might be. Don, what do you think?
Well, Frederick, how many people do you know that own an Aston Martin?
2.
Well, okay, so then they win. But I don't know anybody that owns an Aston Martin. But what I'm saying is street cred is not equal to the number of people that actually own an object. It sort of it lends itself towards the desire of that. But this is weird because they don't say how much of a stake. They say that the business models will stay separate. It's like nothing to see here, move along. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, okay, well, what? There's got to be something going on behind the scenes.
Yeah. It's like we're not dating. We're just kind of hanging out right now. Don't make any inferences.
But Hasselblad does have an aerial camera that they announced not too long ago, the A5D, I think, specifically for aerial purposes, and I'm sure a very, very small market on its own. Maybe there could be some partnership there. I know that Hasselblad has made partnerships, behind the scenes with Panasonic, something similar to what Leica may have done in the past for their less expensive cameras. In order, like Hasselblad has their Lunar series of cameras, which I think they're awful. I don't think that they should have ever been made because it's really outside of the brand of what Hasselblad really should be doing. Yeah. But the point is that they made a strategic partnership with another manufacturer and another company that was not really clear exactly how that partnership worked, and they produced a product based on that. Yeah. Hasselblad is no stranger to that, and I just hope that it wraps around the key allure of the Hasselblad brand and puts that into a Phantom or something similar, because how awesome would it be to be flying around with a drone, probably by the medium format standards, a gigantic drone, but with a specially designed Hasselblad camera body, purposely mounted inside of that thing. That would be awesome. And there would be a market for that for people that are aiming for the higher end aerial market. People that are renting helicopters right now might find that as a viable alternative instead of paying the rental fee and the fuel for renting a helicopter in certain scenarios.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. And as you were talking, I was thinking, so DJI, we've been looking at it from the standpoint of what does DJI get out of this? Why are you doing that? But you're right. What does Hasselblad get out of it? And I'm thinking like, okay, Hasselblad is the older, more mature company trying to partner with the younger, nimble DJI. It's almost like a cougar, looking to capture a younger man, or something like that. So DJI is the younger, nimble, high-tech, popular, in-the-headlines company, and Hasselblad, you don't really hear about them all that much. This might be a way for Hasselblad to elevate itself to the stature of a popular, more hip DJI. So who knows? It's crazy. It's crazy talk happening in this business right now.
Well, and so if you've got that bigger than full frame, the medium format camera, the current aerial product from Hasselblad is available in 50 and 80 megapixel varieties. So I mean, I don't even want to look at the price tag, but an 80 megapixel camera that has a sensor that big, which it's not just like a lot of pixels, the bigger they are, of course, the better they are in many cases, then if you could have that for some real serious work, I mean, it will be a game changer for a very specific niche of that market.
Yeah. Like, what was it? Eric Chang was talking about. I forget the name of the technology, but it was a form of cartography where your drone is mapping, the landmass or a particular area. Maybe this is good for that. In fact, speaking of Eric Chang, maybe we bring him on at some point to help shed some light on this. I bet he has a different idea about this acquisition, or not this acquisition, but this partnership and what it might mean. So, interesting stuff. Never a dull moment in the TWiP universe. Never. Never. All right, guys, we're going to take another quick break. When we come back, we're going to answer a question from one of the TWiP listeners. All right, it is time for some listener Q&A. This week's question is from Mark Friedman. Mark says, "Hi, I have about 1 terabyte of photos. I back up religiously, making 3 separate backups to 3 separate standalone hard drives. I also make a Backblaze backup in the cloud. I've heard Frederick and others mention that they use Drobo for their backup. I'm wondering what the advantages are over what I'm now doing, or if there are any significant disadvantages to what I am now doing." Martin, what do you think? I mean, he's got a pretty rock solid workflow there. I mean, should he introduce a Drobo into that?
Maybe not yet. Firstly, I'd like to say hi to Mark. I know Mark. We've communicated a number of times.
Oh, cool.
And in fact, I've got an email from him in my inbox from yesterday that I'm going to reply to later. So hi, Mark. Yeah, the thing is, I think that with what he's got set up, he doesn't necessarily need a Drobo just yet. I use Drobos. I actually have 2. I don't rely on the fault tolerance in the Drobo. I have the 5Ds, so I've got 5 disks in there.
Yeah.
And that means that one of the disks, or depending on the size, is used for fault tolerance. So you basically, if one drive breaks, you can take it out with the Drobo turned on, put in a new one, and it just rebuilds the data for you. You don't lose anything.
Like magic.
Yeah. So I use the fault tolerance, but I actually have a second Drobo that's simply a backup of my first. And whenever I come back from a big trip and I put all of my images on there, I start up the second Drobo and just sync them so that I've got a second copy. And the first copy goes straight into the cloud. So I'm also backing up to Backblaze from my Drobo.
Yeah.
But this is all very similar to what Mark's got right now. And the only reason that I felt that I needed a Drobo initially was because I could no longer fit all of my images on one hard drive. And I love having everything in one place so that I can make an easy backup of my entire library. And with 1 terabyte of images, Mark's going to be able to continue to do that for a number of years.
Totally.
I've currently got 7 terabytes, 7.5, almost 8 terabytes of photographs. And that's why once I think I bought the Drobo when 2 terabyte drives were still the largest you could get, and I'd gone past 2 terabytes, and I wanted everything on one drive. And so it becomes really, really convoluted if you start to have from 2000 to 2008 on one drive, from 2009 to 2013 on another drive. Mm-hmm. It makes your backups really, really convoluted, and so having them in one place is a big benefit. Yeah. So I would say that once Mark gets past the point where he can get all of his images on one drive, bearing in mind that he's already got all of these other backups and the Backblaze cloud backup in place, I would say that the biggest thing for him to consider is just buying something like a Drobo once his images are no longer able to fit in one drive. Mm-hmm. There is, of course, the fault tolerance is a big thing. Hard drives will fail at some point, and so it's always nice to have the fault tolerance of a Drobo, but they're not cheap, And so if you're gonna spend $1,000 on a drive and the hard drives that you start to put in there, it's a little bit more of an investment to think about. But the good thing about Drobos as well is that once you can start off with just 2 drives, you get the housing, put 2 drives in there, you've got fault tolerance. If you use 4 terabyte drives, put 2 in. They're like $200 now for a 4 terabyte drive. Mm-hmm. Put 2 in, you get 4 terabytes of fault tolerant space, and that means if you use that as your master backup, then even if one of those drives does break, you can whip it out, put another one in, and it doesn't really skip a beat. So. Yeah. And then as your storage requirements increase, just put another drive in, and they don't all have to be the same size drives either. I'm looking at my main Drobo. I've got 4 terabyte drives and a 2 terabyte drive in there. And what I do is I just buy additional drives. I always have a spare ready, and now the 2 terabyte drive is the last 2 terabyte drive to break. And so when that breaks, I'll take it out and put a 4 in, and and it'll just keep working. So they grow with your requirements as well.
Love it, love it. I can't say that any better. That's exactly what I would have recommended in terms of, because he said he has 3 separate standalone drives. When you hit the ceiling, that's when you start upgrading and putting in a more robust solution. And I also agree with you, Martin, on the idea of not relying on the fault tolerance of the Drobo, because they fail too. So
Right.
to have a second Drobo like you do and I do, that you have a mirror of it on the second Drobo, so you have multiple layers of redundancy, but don't even look at the fact that the Drobo can withstand a hard drive failure internally. Just look at it as a single drive and put another Drobo next to it, and this is all obviously budget notwithstanding, but put another drive next to it and mirror them, so that now you have one, you have the other, and you can expand capacity on the fly as you go. Don Komariska, what about you? What do you think about this flow?
It's funny that all 3 of us on this panel each have 2 Drobos, but the reason, it's probably the same for all of us. But here's one scenario that I hope never happens to anybody. Okay, one drive on your Drobo fails. You pop it out and you put in a new one. It has to go through an active healing process where it redistributes all of the data onto the new drive and makes everything well again. If something happens during that process, you lose everything. So
if something happens, like what, like a power outage or something like that?
No, a power outage won't necessarily fail, but like if another drive fails during that process, because if you have a bunch of drives of about the same age, one fails just before another, or another one is starting to fail already, but it hasn't shown its symptoms to Drobo yet, those symptoms would be revealed when it has to read all of the data to heal itself, and thereby your array is gone. Now, Drobo does have the ability to use a dual drive redundancy setup, so this might be something good for Mark if he only has a small amount of data, and he says standalone drives, so I'm assuming these are external drives, not internal drives.
Probably.
If he had internal drives, you could always just plug them into the Drobo, and then that saves you a little bit of the budget there. And if you have dual disk redundancy, 2 drives out of the 5, if you're using a Drobo 5D, can fail. And so that kind of helps you there, but it is one location of data. The only use case I think that would be very useful for Mark is convenience. I don't know how often he backs up to these drives, but if he goes out and shoots and then comes back to his computer, downloads them onto his main computer or his main hard drive, and then plugs in another external drive and copies it there, then plugs in another external drive and copies it there, I would be so lazy I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And so that does
human failure, right? Yeah.
Laziness does not a backup make, because I'm not going to handle that process. It's my data is going to sit in one location. Now the Backblaze, I use Carbonite, very similar service, and I'd say absolutely get your images offsite. Heaven forbid somebody breaks into your office and steals your computer, or fire, flood, what have you. You'd lose anything on site, and there's always the risk of that. So I think he's got a great strategy. I think a Drobo might be an option, like you guys said, for the future, keeping in mind with even a lower amount of data, the dual disk redundancy can help you stay secure, and as Martin said, keep everything in one place, because it's that convenience factor that will help you back things up.
That's right. Yeah, having things all over the place is a recipe for laziness and disaster. Yeah, I agree. Cool, guys. Perfect answers to that question. I hope that was helpful for Mr. Mark Friedman. And Martin, if you haven't emailed him, you'll be doing that tonight, right?
Yeah. Well, it's a different question, but yeah, I'll get back to him today.
Okay. All right. Cool. All right, and listeners, if you have a question you'd like us to tackle on the show, just email Martin Bailey directly, and no, just head over to thisweekinphoto.com, click on that submit a question link, and send us a question, and we'll try to get to it on the show. All right, guys, I did an interview recently with another one of our sponsors, Stride Health. This was an interesting interview, as you'll hear when you listen to it after I finish yakking. But Stride Health is different from our other advertisers on This Week in Photo. In fact, in the respect that they're not a company that's doing something photography related directly. Instead, they appeal to folks like me and probably you guys that are independent solopreneurs that have to purchase their own health insurance. and they demystify that process and make it brain dead easy, and like we just got through saying, even the lazy person can sign up for health insurance with a couple of clicks now. In fact, I use them to sign up for my health insurance because I'm one of those lazy people. But anyway, listen to this interview, and I'd be interested to hear what you guys think in the comments. All right, we're on to this week's Pick of the Week. This is the segment where you guys can pick anything to recommend to the TWiP listeners as long as it is related to photography. Martin Bailey, I'm going to let you go first. What's your pick of the week?
I've got a sneaking feeling I might have done this one in the past. But this is something that is really on my. I've actually started a project at the moment with these guys. There's a company called Artisan State, and they do these amazing flush mount albums where they lay totally flat. I'm pretty sure I've done this before, but I
don't remember seeing this.
No, I mean if you're watching, you can see Frederick's got this up on the screen now. But they're pretty amazing books. They lay totally flat, and I'm currently putting together. I'm going to do a really nice Iceland and Namibia book, just for me initially, but just get one with probably a leather bound, the leather cover on it and all of that. And they just look so stunning. And apparently they have like a $5 special offer in your first month if you get your act together and actually sign up, and then you can get this really cheap book from them. I'm not sure of the details of that. I haven't gone through it yet, but their products look amazing. Even their framed prints look pretty cool. So I'm looking forward to getting into working with the guys at Artisan State. So they're my pick of the week.
I may use them for my post-Vietnam book. This looks
it'd be great.
This looks amazing. Look at that.
How many pages can you have in a book? It looks like you can't have more than maybe 40 or 50 or so.
You can. I think you can have it's probably around 50 or 60. I'm not sure. It's a lot. It's more than they show in their imagery on their website. But of course they're going to be huge, big, fat books, because some of the pages are like a millimeter or so. If you go for the fattest, the thickest possible pages, they're pretty substantial. But yeah, they're not sort of thin paper books. Even their thinnest stock is relatively hefty.
Yeah, these are
Very
beautiful. Cool. Very good. Look at that.
Bling
cover. Look at that.
Yeah. I'm thinking of them as a portfolio book more than anything. So mostly portfolios. They're not going to be much more than 50 pages or so anyway.
But look at this one. Look at this book here that I have on the screen here. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. Oh, it's got a metal cover. Isn't that cool?
That's crazy. I want that right now.
I want that book.
With those images in it.
Yeah.
This is great. What a good pick, man. Cool.
Yeah, they're good.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Martin. That's a great pick of the week.
You're welcome.
All right. Mr. Don Komarechka, can you top that pick of the week?
I doubt it. But I do have something interesting in a completely different way. I picked up recently, DxO Optics makes their Optics Pro software, and they've had it out for a little bit a while now. Their Optics Pro 10. And one of the reasons why I picked this up is because I really liked their noise reduction engine, their Prime noise reduction. I just found that with my camera and the types of images that I use, when I really push limits, they can do wonders within that. They let me push those limits a little bit farther. But in the previous version of the software, it took so damn long. Like I would be sitting there for like 5 minutes while I'm just waiting for this noise reduction thing. I could, go get a drink or a sandwich or what have you, come back, and I'd still be waiting. It's improved. The speed is much, much faster now in this particular version of the software. I'm not sure if the algorithm has changed to produce better results. I haven't done a side-by-side comparison, but it's still fantastic and it's better to use. So I'm really happy with the performance increases that they have produced. I mean, long ago I invested in a computer with far more processor cores than you could imagine, and very few pieces of software have taken advantage of that. And Optics Pro 10 definitely comes a little bit closer to using that. Can you believe that there's still, like, in the full version of Photoshop CC, half the stuff that I try to do, it's like locked to one processor core. I have 24 processor cores and 48 threads. I mean, like when I'm trying to save a file and I'm looking at it, doing its thing, and in the task manager, it's using one processor. You'd think that something as fundamental like that could probably be spread apart onto multiple things, but Adobe and the big guys haven't really been embracing that. DxO has a little bit with their software now, and I've been pretty happy with On1 actually, which we talked about last time I was on, for using multiple processor cores as well. So a shout out for the little guy in the big scheme of things to play around with that DxO Optics Pro 10.
Isn't that cool how we're getting all these cool different tools that we can play with now, and it's no longer a Adobe solo game, right? I mean, these guys are diving in and doing some magic with pixel processing these days, and it's just it's awesome on the one hand that there's all these tools out there, but it's also I'm getting analysis paralysis with all these awesome options I have now. It's like, do I use DxO, or do I use On1, or do I stick with Lightroom, or do I go
Nik or Topaz or blah blah? There's
It's just like and the analysis paralysis. I'm just gonna stay where I am. No, but you're right. Yeah, you got to play with this stuff because it's depending on what your flavor of photography is, this could take your photography. I hate the phrase to the next level, but it could help enhance what you're already doing. So very cool, and cool on the guys at DxO. Last time we heard from them was with that DxO One, their camera that plugs into your iPhone to do cool shots that way. So very cool. That was a good pick, Martin. I would say, or Don, I would say that it matches Martin's pick in terms of usefulness.
I don't know. I would feel much better having one of those really awesome photo books on my desk than this box. Actually, a knock on DxO. This is the only piece of software I've bought in the last 7 or 8 years that came in a box that had to be mailed to me.
Well, you couldn't download it? There's no download?
No, they had to send me a physical box.
You're kidding, right? No,
I'm not kidding.
Surely there must be a mistake.
You know what? I bought it from B&H. They had it on sale on a special, but then I had looked around. Yeah, they have to ship you a physical box. So
wait a minute. Wait, they've got a try button on the site. I got to see this because that's.
Well, maybe it's different. Maybe it's just.
I'm looking on the site. DxO trial version, Windows and Mac, free download.
Okay, good. Thank you,
I'm clicking on the Mac. Maybe it's going to ask me for an address. No, there's a download button. And it's downloading. I'm downloading DxO Optics Pro 10.
I don't know why B&H
right
only
now.
had a boxed version, but anyhow.
Maybe it's probably part of the supply chain. They're like, okay, because we can't manage inventory on downloads for B&H, we're going to give you boxed versions so we can sell them to your site and in the store. Yeah,
Frederick, you just said that they're going to give you boxed virgins. That's like...
Was that a Freudian slip? All right, it's time to end the show now, clearly. So you'll get my boxed version. All right, guys. My pick, what did I have to pick? So my pick was I'm still experimenting with my new Panasonic GX8, which is the camera I'm taking to Vietnam with me. But my pick is not necessarily that camera. It's a functionality that I've never used on any of my Lumix cameras that I'm now using, and that's the custom functions on there, or being able to preset the presets on the camera. So on the PASM dial, there's C1, C2, and C3. You can essentially preset them to do different things. So my camera, I've got it set on C1 to do video. So if I just turn that dial to C1, it goes into 1080 video. I could have put it in 4K, but I put it in 1080 video. It puts the microphone levels on the screen. It gives me a histogram, everything to shoot video. It's ready to go. All I have to do is press the button by just putting on C1. C2 I have set for HDR, so everything I need, like in terms of bracketing and all that, is already ready to go. Just press the button and I'm bracketing. And then C3 I set for black and white photography, and Peter Giordano gave me that idea, and I set it for black and white. So now I put it on that. My LCD is now black and white, and I can concentrate on my subject better, and just kind of do street photography that way. With the GX8, when you put it on black and white, it records the raw file, obviously, in full color. It's just raw data, but it generates a JPEG in black and white, so you can kind of get a preview of what it looks like. So that feature is kind of cool. It almost makes me feel like I have 3 different cameras because I'm just I can just flick and not have to worry about programming the thing every single time and forgetting some setting. I just turn it and keep shooting. It's pretty cool. So the custom settings on the Lumix cameras are my pick of the week.
I want to echo something, Frederick, to that.
Yeah.
That the custom settings on just about every camera, like I didn't use mine. Like I've got the Canon 1DX that has some similar functionality, and I think Martin has the same camera. It took me like 2 years before I ever found a use case for those particular settings.
Right. Yeah.
And then as soon as I did, it's like, why did I never try to use these before? I mean,
yeah, it was just sitting there taking up real estate, and now I'm using them. So if you have one of these cameras that's let you set custom, I think the reason that I didn't do it was I'm like, okay, I don't feel like diving through the manual to figure out how to set all this stuff up or whatever. It's brain dead simple. All you have to do is you put it on that mode, like in C1, you configure the camera how you want, and you go into the menu settings and save it. And now whenever you go back to that setting, everything changes. You could on the Lumix cameras, you can even change the operation of all the function buttons, which there are many. So like on my camera, when I'm in C1, this button now activates the Wi-Fi transfer mode, but when I'm in C3, this button activates the Wi-Fi transfer mode. So you can get to that level of minutia. So I just sat down one night on the couch. I was watching, what was I watching? I don't know, Heroes or something. And I'm just like going through and programming my camera and getting it dialed in perfectly. And then once I'm done with that, I'm still kind of tweaking things, but once I get it perfect, I'm gonna, my backup camera, which is a G7, I'm gonna transfer the settings over there. I don't know if I can physically transfer them, but I'm gonna set them up the same way so that my backup camera is the same as my primary. So if I have to use it, it's all good, and I can just keep rolling. So yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy, this new technology stuff. I think it's gonna stick around.
These newfangled camera things.
Yeah, these newfangled cameras. Kids today. All right, guys, let's sign off. We're running a little bit long. This is a good show. These good shows always run a little bit long. Martin, what's coming up in your world over the next coming months?
I'm getting ready now. Really looking forward to the winter season. My Japan winter tours are coming up. We've still got 2 places. The wildlife tours have sold out. They've been sold out for a while, but we do have 2 places left open on my January 10th Hokkaido landscape tour. This is like Michael Kenner-ish sort of photography, lots of minimal winter landscapes.
Cool.
So if anyone's into that, take a look at the. We'll probably put a link in the show notes, but it's at mbp.ac/HLPA for Hokkaido Landscape Photography Adventure.
Say that one more time for the folks that are trying to write it down while they're driving.
mbp.ac/HLPA.
Excellent, excellent. Of course, I'm joking. Don't write that down while you're driving. We'll just come back to the site later, and Martin will have a link for it in the show notes. So. Yeah. Cool, Martin. Thank you for that, and thanks for coming on.
You're welcome.
All right, Mr. Don Komarechka, what's coming on? What's up with you in the next coming weeks?
Well, I'm traveling this weekend to go to Grand Prairie, Alberta, and that's north of Edmonton, so it's fairly snowy, probably. They're hiring me to do a macro water droplet refraction workshop, and if there's snowflakes out there, then we will switch gears into snowflakes, although the weather is unpredictable. So that's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to that. That's all sold out, has been for quite some time.
I remember you doing a shot like that. Didn't you do? I remember 2 shots of yours like that. One had a Canadian flag in it, if I'm not mistaken. You did one that was like a yellow daisy or a flower.
Yeah, and it's so fun when you're doing that kind of stuff because you can put like a flower in behind and it'll refract. A water droplet, the more spherical it is, it acts like a lens. And so whatever you put in behind it gets refracted through the droplet. So I put pictures, I put a map of the Earth in behind, and you actually get the Earth inside the water droplet. Yeah. So there's so many fun creative ideas that you can have just on your kitchen table in the middle of the wintertime. And so we'll have a lot of fun doing that particular workshop. And I do those here in my own studio. I've built a purpose-built classroom, and those dates I'll be posting them soon for January and February as well. But the big news is I finished with a project that's taken me 5 years.
What?
And 2,500
You're
hours.
talking about your marriage, right? Not that.
I'm talking about what started with my book on snowflakes, and it has turned into a giant poster print. And this has about 400 or so snowflakes, all positioned in relative size to one another. Which means I had to measure every single one of them, which you might ask, okay, well, how the heck is he actually being accurate with the size? Because the big ones are big compared to the small ones being small.
Yeah.
The Canon MPE 65mm lens that I use to photograph all of these records a super secret bit of metadata in an area of the EXIF data called maker notes that is called magnification factor. And if you get special software to read that, I can use that with the physical size of the sensor and the number of pixels across it to figure out the number of pixels per millimeter on each snowflake. And I spent the most boring days of my life measuring each and every one of these snowflakes to put together into this poster project that is, I've just got the quotes in, I've decided on the printer that I'm dealing with, the highest possible end printing to do a production run of these. And so this will be announced within the next week or two, and I will put a link in the show notes for anybody from the TWiP audience that wants to pre-order one. They'll be able to do that there as well.
Don, I gotta have one of those. I gotta have one. Seriously, I gotta have one. So, and I don't want you giving me one either. I want to buy it. That
all right,
thing,
well, thank you.
That thing is ridiculous. Cool, awesome. Congratulations, man.
Thank you.
Are you
thank you.
gonna do a blog post or something on how you did it?
I'll be doing a big announcement. Some of that will be rolled into the product page where people can order it so they can see all the interesting details with it. And with each print, I'll also have a special little 8.5 by 11 that you can tuck in the back of the frame that just details that exact process so that that'll always stay with the artwork as well.
All right. Well, I'm customer number 1 right here. I'm buying one. So TWiP Army, fall in line behind me and get yours too. So, cool, guys. Awesome. Very good show. I'm excited. This is a really good show. I think that's it. We're at the end of another episode of This Week in Photo. I want to thank our sponsors. That was lynda.com, FreshBooks, and Eyefi for their support of the show. And I'll put links to Martin and Don's online presences in the notes. You guys can follow them. Of course, you know where they are already. They've been on the show, 9 trillion times? So you know how to catch up with them. And, the same with This Week in Photo. We're at thisweekinphoto.com. You know where to find us. And with that, it's time to take that lens cap off.